Imagine you had to write a survival guide for your entire country, knowing it was about to face off against the world's biggest superpowers. Well, that's pretty much what we're breaking down today, Iran's incredible 2-decade-long blueprint for survival.
I mean, really think about that question. How can any nation possibly survive a full-on war with global superpowers? You'd think it's an impossible scenario, right? A sustained military and economic assault from the most powerful countries on Earth. It just sounds like a total wipeout.
But what if this wasn't about luck? What if survival was actually part of a deliberate design? It turns out there is a plan, one that was meticulously crafted by the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps to withstand this exact doomsday scenario.
Okay, so the very heart of this whole thing is a concept they call mosaic defense. And let me be clear, this isn't just one piece of the puzzle, it is the absolute key to understanding Iran's entire approach to a modern war.
So what exactly is mosaic defense? Well, it's a pretty radical way of thinking about a military structure. Forget the typical top-down pyramid. Instead, picture a network, like a spider web. The whole point isn't to protect the guy at the top. It's to make sure the entire network can keep fighting even if the top gets completely cut off.
So here's how it would actually play out. Let's say a decapitation strike takes out the central command in Tehran. Instead of chaos and collapse, a protocol immediately kicks in. Across the country, 31 independent provincial commands instantly activate. From that moment on, they command their own local units to keep up the fight totally on their own. It's a chain reaction that's built for survival.
Now, the people who designed this, they were paying very close attention during the Iraq War. They watched how a centralized system like Saddam's completely crumbled once the leadership was gone. So, you know what they did? They designed the exact opposite. Each of those 31 provinces is basically its own self-sufficient fortress, with its own fuel, its own food, and its own local fighting force, all ready to go it alone.
And that is the whole point. And analysts back this up. This isn't just some theory on a whiteboard. The entire system, the whole apparatus, is built so that taking out any single leader, or even a whole group of them, doesn't actually stop the machine.
Right, but a clever military plan isn't enough on its own. You need support. You need lifelines. So let's take a look at the external pillars that are holding this whole blueprint up and keeping it from collapsing. First up, money. Now, you'd think that crushing sanctions would completely cut off Iran's oil sales, but one global power has become its #1 lifeline: China. And to get around those sanctions, Iran uses what's known as a shadow fleet. This is a whole network of tankers that do things like turn off their trackers, switch flags, or even transfer oil from one ship to another out in the middle of the ocean, anything to hide where it came from. Yeah, they have to sell it at a discount, but it brings in just enough cash to keep the economy from totally falling apart.
Next, you've got diplomatic cover. On the one hand, the whole point of Western sanctions was to achieve total isolation. But the reality is very different. Because both Russia and China have veto power on the UN Security Council, Iran is effectively shielded from the most crippling international punishments. The bottom line is, they're not really alone on the world stage.
And finally, we have the military angle that goes way beyond its own borders. This is the so-called Axis of Resistance. It's a network of allied armed groups all across the Middle East. Groups like Hezbollah in Lebanon or the Houthis in Yemen. They basically act as a forward defense, forcing Iran's enemies to fight on multiple fronts at once and projecting Iranian influence far outside its own territory.
But, and this is so important to understand, this entire strategy of survival comes at an absolutely enormous cost. Because surviving a war is not, and I mean not, the same thing as thriving, especially if you're a regular civilian living through it.
50%. That's how much the Iranian currency lost its value in just 9 months, between mid-2024 and early 2025. Just try to imagine that. Your life savings, your paycheck, suddenly worth half of what it was just a few months ago.
And somehow, it got even worse. In 2025, food prices shot up by over 70%. Think about that. The basic cost of just feeding your family became a crushing burden for millions and millions of people.
And this wasn't just about prices at the grocery store. Direct attacks on the country's energy infrastructure had a devastating ripple effect. The entire economy shrank somewhere between 6 and 9%, while the overall inflation rate blasted past 40%. This was a country under a severe economic siege.
All that economic pain, well, it inevitably boiled over. Widespread protests started breaking out across the entire country, in all 31 provinces. It was a clear sign of massive internal unrest, and it was met with a very heavy-handed response from the state.
So when you look at all this,
What's the end game? What's the goal? This brings us to the core philosophy behind the entire survival blueprint. It's not about winning some glorious, decisive victory on the battlefield. No, it's about something else entirely.
The whole strategy is to turn time itself into a weapon. The bet is that Iran can absorb more pain for a longer period than its adversaries can sustain the political will and financial cost of a long, drawn-out conflict. It's a brutal war of attrition, a very high-stakes game of chicken.
So let's just pull this all together. You've got the Mosaic Defense, which keeps the military in the fight, but the big risk is that these provincial commanders could go rogue. Then you have the Long War Doctrine, which is designed to wear down the enemy, but the trade-off is it absolutely cripples your own people and economy. And finally, using its control over the Strait of Hormuz creates global pressure, sure, but it could easily trigger a much bigger, more devastating global war. You see? Every single part of this strategy comes with a huge, dangerous trade-off. So if there's one thing you take away from all this, let it be this. Iran's survival blueprint isn't designed to outfight its enemies. It's designed to outlast them. The entire idea is to take sheer endurance, the ability to just take punch after punch and keep standing, and turn that into its most powerful weapon.
So at the end of the day, this whole thing really hinges on one single bet, that Iran's will to survive is stronger than its enemy's will to keep fighting. It reframes the whole conflict. It's not about who has the better jets or bigger bombs, it's about who has more resolve to endure the pain. And that leaves us with the big, unanswered question.